Hey everybody, welcome to alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir by building things. Today we're going to build, or at least start building, the Phoenix version of StatWatch. So you can see the site that I just recently launched over here, and I went over it last video, went over our plans last video. If you want to get a better idea of the whole scope of this project, then go back and check that one out. Or just hang on here and we will dive right into it. So first thing we need to do is make a Phoenix project. The existing StatWatch app is just an OTP app that's inside of this campsite app, which is a Cowboy web server. We're going to make a new Phoenix app that's also called StatWatch. So first we'll bump up the font size and go full screen. And we'll open up the terminal. So we'll start by making a new Phoenix project by using the generator. This is Phoenix 1.3, so we just type phx instead of Phoenix. Then in a moment, we'll make a new accounts context. The way the new generators work is HTML will still generate the controllers and the schemas and pretty much all the stuff, but we put a name of a context before the name of our schema. So we have users, which belong in the accounts context. Plural is users, and they're just going to have a name and a username. Username is unique. The name doesn't have to be unique. And once that's done, we'll migrate the changes, and then we'll make a credential. And credentials are basically going to be things like your email and password, or maybe we can make some OAuth later. This is going to be very, very similar to the Phoenix 1.3 up and running guide. So if you did that, this will be pretty straightforward for you. Email is going to be unique, and this credential is going to reference a user, and the user will use that to log in. And then we'll migrate those changes. But actually, we're going to do that from the new directory. IEX.bat, since this is PowerShell and IEX means something in PowerShell, -s mix phoenix.server. Okay, the symlinks, that's actually not a big problem. It's still pretty much fast enough. So this is going to be a localhost 4000. All right, so we've got our basic Phoenix app up. So the next thing to do is make those schemas. Yes, this mistake comes from not following the directions and making a route. So we'll go to our new router. Where is our new StatWatch? Here we go. And lib, StatWatch web, open up our router and make a resources here. So the instructions said resources users, and this will just do all of the RESTful resources for us. We'll save that. And actually, let's just to see how this works, let's do a mix Phoenix routes. So you can see here, this has generated an index route, an edit, a new, a show, a create, an update, a delete, at all of these standard locations that should be familiar to you if you've worked with Rails or any other backend MVC framework. So now that that's done, we can run our migration. And the relation users already exists. And that's because we're in the default database, which I have used many, many times. And I've done a few apps that were called StatWatch. So what we need to do is, actually we don't need to change any of this. This is fine. Our default database has this information. I'm just gonna drop everything from the repo, and that way we get a clean start. And then I'll create. Now, if you don't have a database user called Postgres and a password Postgres that will give it access, you'll have to create that first. I did a video earlier that did not use Phoenix and was just adding Ecto to the Stats app. I recommend you check that out if you're not sure how it works. And all right, so our database is created. Now we should be able to run the migration. Excellent. It worked, and just so that we can see what exactly happened in that migration, it's probably something you should check first. It's just I'm very familiar with what's going to happen here. So we just created a users table, and it has two fields. There's one which is name, the other is username. They're both strings. And then it has timestamps, which also get added, and the username is unique. Then the next thing we need to do is copy the schemas from the original StatWatch to the core directory. There actually isn't a core directory yet. We're going to make that. Looking in our Phoenix app, StatWatch, you can see there's a StatWatch and a StatWatch web. StatWatch is where we have the contexts, and we have the base non-web part of the app. So we've got one, which is accounts, and this was created for us. Actually, let's take a quick look at that, since it's a pretty big thing in Phoenix 1.3. So we've got a user, got the schema generated, made a change set for us, got credentials, same deal here. And this is all just default behavior that came out of what the fields were and what their types were. Then the accounts context was generated for us. And this has a lot of comments that kind of obscure what I'm trying to show. So if you want to see the comments, you can just generate your own Phoenix app and they will be there. Okay, there. I've deleted the comments, and you can see this really doesn't have that much in it. So we've got two parts, one for the user, one for the profile, since those are the two schemas we've created. And we've got a bunch of utility functions like list users. This is something the index can use. And this is actually something the index does use if we open up the user controller. So now in Phoenix 1.3, the controllers will use these convenience functions instead of dealing with the repo directly. So the accounts has a list users. For new, we have a change user that's been created instead of doing ecto change set. And create user, same deal, just a bunch of convenience functions. We'll go back to the context. So the accounts context has change sets for doing the creation of users and for changing users. And then we've got the exact same stuff down here for credential. So over time, I wouldn't say it's exactly the kitchen sink, but a lot of things that we would have put in the controller before now go into the context. All right, so with that done, actually we haven't done anything. We've just gone over the existing context. So the thing to do now is we're going to make a new context for the files that come from the old StatWatch. So we have accounts that we created. Then in the non-Phoenix StatWatch up here, we've got a couple schemas. There's stats. This is what gets recorded every day or every 6 hours or however often you set it. And then the profiles. Profiles are different from the users we just created. Profiles are the profiles of the stats being collected. For example, alchemist.camp is a URL, and there's an associated Twitter account, alchemistcamp, and an associated YouTube account, which has a kind of difficult to remember channel ID like they all do. This would be considered one profile, and I, as a user, might make a profile for Alchemist Camp, I might make one for StatWatch, I might make one for my blog, and so on. And then what we're going to do is copy these two schemas, profile and stat, and put them straight into a new context that we call core. We'll just use xcopy, campsite, StatWatch, schema, lib schemas, I believe. And we'll copy all of that to lib/StatWatch/core. Two files copied, got a profile, got our stats. Okay, good deal. Now let's go back to our to-do list here. Right, we don't even have change sets in the profile because we created that without a generator. We did it before we were even using Phoenix at all. So let's go to the profile and we'll make pretty much a basic change set for it. So change set and profile object, or profile schema I should say, equals profile and the attributes. And then cast, which basically just takes a list of atoms, and those are the fields that you want to be updated in the change set. So if you don't put it in here, the changes will not get saved. And this is a lot of atoms, so there's actually a better way to do this. This is one valid syntax. Another that's a lot terser is we could just use a sigil. And the wordless sigil normally makes a bunch of strings, but we can have it make atoms if we pass an A to the end. So name, URL, Twitter, YouTube, and user ID. And we pass an atom at the end of it. So this A makes them come out as atoms. Then let's see, then we've got to validate the requireds. Next is validating required attributes. And we need name, actually. There isn't anything else that's required in profiles. The name has to be unique. That should be sufficient. So each schema, which is just a set of profiles you want to log stats on, each one has many stats, and it belongs to a user, and the user is going to be StatWatch .accounts.user. And inside the user, we also need some associations. So user has many profiles. Because they might have a whole bunch of sites and YouTube channels and so forth they want to keep track of. And we'll say that the user has one credential, although in the future that's definitely something that might become a has many. And we've got to have the credential as well as the user. All right, then we're going to migrate all of this. Profile struct is undefined in core profile. All right. All right, we're going to need a couple things here. First, we're going to have to import the ecto.changeSet, and then we're going to have to alias StatWatch.profile since we're using it. Associated schema profile does not exist. That's the same basic kind of problem. Okay, looks good. Okay, copy the application EX contents. That's not really going to be that straightforward yet. Let's do that after we've run in the scheduler. Copy the content of statwatch.ex. Okay. So in our generated Phoenix application, we have the StatWatch folder, the StatWatch web folder. StatWatch.ex is up one level from that. It's right here. And it's basically, well, it's totally empty except for comments. And so we could just take the entire contents of our old StatWatch.ex, which was the workhorse of our whole app. I will copy all of that and paste it in. Okay, now we've got some cleanup to do. First thing is to break apart this run function. That's because right now, the only way we can fetch stats and save them to the database conveniently in one go is to do it from every single profile at once. And we might want to do it differently now that it's going to be a more interactive web app. So we might have a user create a new profile, and that user isn't me inserting it by hand. That user is just some random person who's using StatWatch. And what we want to do is have it so when they create a new profile, they'll get stats logged immediately instead of waiting until the next day or whatever the cutoff is when they would have been scheduled to be collected. So we'll make a new function called FetchStatsSave. And this is going to take a profile, and then it's going to do all the stuff that is here in the run. So we'll just copy all of that down. And yeah, we'll leave that exactly as is. So it will fetch the stats. It will use this force int helper that I made before that ensures every single stat is an integer, since they have to be integers in the database. And then we'll save the profile. And we can use this function now. So we'll do this, fetch stats, and save. Then the next thing is some profiles may not have a URL in the profile. Actually, this is, I don't like calling this user anymore, so I'm going to change all of these to profile. Just for clarity, now that the database actually does have a user table. Yeah, there may not be a URL in the profile. Maybe they just had a Twitter account or they just had a YouTube account. And if we get to this profile.url and there is no URL, that's going to cause an exception. So what we'll do is we'll set Alexa based on an if. So if profile.url, then we'll set it as so. And if there isn't one, then all of this will get skipped and profile.url will never get evaluated, so we won't have an error. Then Twitter is basically the same deal. So we'll say Twitter equals if profile.twitter, do all of this. And if there is no Twitter set, then no problem. We didn't even evaluate that. And the Twitter variable will be nil. Okay, then next is YouTube. YouTube's a bit more complicated because we're doing an HTTP GET from this stats URL. And then we're taking the JSON response and decoding it and getting subscriber count, video count, and view count out of that. So what we're going to do is just make a default variable. And the default variable is just going to set everything to unlisted. The reason I'm saying unlisted instead of nil is someone could still use the CSV generating function, and it'd be nicer to put unlisted on the CSVs. Video count also unlisted. And finally, we have the view count. Same deal. So if these things don't get changed, they'll all be unlisted. And then YouTube is going to equal, let's see, this is going to be a little bit more complicated here. YouTube. So we'll do a case on this GET request. And if we do get a body back from that, then we will process this part, and that's going to be the same thing because we're going to do a case on this decode right here. And if we get the items, then that will be our stats. If we don't get our items, then we'll just go with the default, which means everything is unlisted. And then in the case that the HTTP GET fails or doesn't return a body for whatever reason, then that's also going to lead to the default of everything being unlisted. So we'll open up IEX mix. Sweet XML is not loaded. Ah, yes, we still need to get all the dependencies. So this is a good time to do that. We'll open up our mix file. I'm going to change Elixir to 152. And then we'll just go down here and add a few things actually. I'm going to add poison, HTTP poison. That's for doing our HTTP gets. And sweet XML, and then Floki. We don't need that comma here. Okay. Not version 52, not yet. Oh, right. I've got to name these YouTube. Twitter was unused. Let's see where that was. That's inside here. And looks like that was the only one. Okay. So now let's make a profile. And I'm just going to use my own information here. Alchemist Camp. Okay, so StatWatch dot fetch stats. And we're not going to save, and that's because we don't have this profile in the database. We don't have anything in the database yet. This should still go through all the collection though, data processing. Okay, so that's a date. That's the number of YouTube subscribers, number of videos published, number of views, Twitter followers, Alexa rank. All of that looks good. And the logic for saving to the database is completely unchanged. Everything else is unchanged. So back to the plan. So clean up StatWatch is good. That's good. That's good. Copy the scheduler. Okay, that's pretty simple. We've got a scheduler that does the stat collection every so often. And it's right there. All right, while we're here, let's upgrade it a little bit. So the scheduler as it is super simple. All this does is run StatWatch, and then schedule work sets up a time to run StatWatch again. These are milliseconds. So as it is now, it does work every 6 hours. All it's done in the work besides scheduling the next batch is to run itself. So it's just getting the stats every 6 hours. We're going to change that to once a day. So we'll make a module attribute to help us here. Full day. And a full day is 60 minutes times 60 seconds times 24 hours times 1000, and that's because we're dealing in milliseconds instead of seconds. Then in schedule work, let's make it run at midnight every night. So we'll get midnight from time. So time.new will make a time. Visual Studio Code is so useful. So it'll make a time from an hour, a minute, and a second. You can set microseconds or not. We're just going to say 0, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. So that's midnight. Now we're going to make a variable for milliseconds past midnight. And the way we'll get this is with time.diff. That gets a difference between two times. And those would be midnight and now. And we need absolute value. And that's because time.diff, for whatever strange reason, sometimes returns negative values. So midnight, UTC now, and then milliseconds. So now we've got the amount of time past last midnight in milliseconds, but we need the number of milliseconds until midnight tonight. And that's going to be the number of milliseconds in a full day minus the milliseconds past midnight. Why is that? There we go. And then the process.send, it's just going to be milliseconds until midnight. Okay, so not a huge change, but we're just going to run our scheduler once a day, and it's always going to run at midnight in UTC, otherwise known as GMT time zone. With that done, we'll copy pretty much the whole file into our new app, and that's going to go in the same general spot. So StatWatch, and then it's going to be at the same level as the application EX and the repo EX. And it's still going to be called scheduler. Like so. And then we got to add this to our application.ex, or else it won't run. So we're going to go through the same getting rid of the comments process as before. All right, then we're going to add a worker to the children. So we've got StatWatch.repo, StatWatch.endpoint. This is our web endpoint, so that what didn't exist in the old StatWatch app. And now we'll add the scheduler as a worker. StatWatch. And I'm not going to pass it any options. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy the basic structure of our accounts context into a new context for core. It would have been nice to have a generator, but we didn't start this as a Phoenix app, so such is life. We'll just call this core.ex. Copy everything in here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is do a mass replace on all the accounts with core. And next we're going to replace users with profiles. So we'll do another mass edit. Profile. And let's see here. This is a little bit of a pain because we're not matching on a case sensitive value. But I think we can probably handle it. Profile and that should be all of them. Now we don't actually want anything in here for stat, and we're just going to get rid of what's in there for credential. So this is a starting point. Now, do we actually want exactly this? I would say maybe we don't. Maybe we want to get profiles by names. I'm just going to add that option right here. So to get profile by name, we'll just actually call it exactly that. Do repo.getBy. Still has to take a profile, and then it takes a map with the name that was just passed into the function. And I think anytime we get a profile, we're going to want to preload the stats. So let's do that here. And let's get the user too. Okay. And that's actually something we're going to want to get even if we get profile this way. So we're going to make this not a one-line function anymore. Okay, and let's also add a delete by name. repo.delete. Okay, so this is a starting point. This is what we'll use to interact with profiles externally. Stats, we're not really going to add much here, and the reason for that is because we don't want it to be super convenient for people to manipulate and delete their stats. Otherwise, it kind of breaks the idea of the whole app. All right, now let's open up a new terminal and run mix and make sure there aren't any problems. Okay, there is one. So the scheduler is missing a closing parenthesis. So it is. And profile struct is undefined in StatWatch core. That's because we did alias it, statwatch.core.profile. That's because the profile and the stat are just directly under StatWatch instead of statwatch.core. You know, let's just keep with the whole context philosophy here. We'll do that, and there may be some places where we said statwatch.profile. All right, stat, and we'll make this statwatch.core.stat. Let's do a global find just to make sure there aren't any more lurking out there. So statwatch.profile. Core dot and then profile and stat will get together. And let's see what this one is. Same deal. And we don't have one that's statwatch.stat. Okay, looks like we're good. And it looks like that is dealt with, but now can't start the application, and that's because, yeah, the relation profiles did not previously exist. So we're gonna have to look at our migrations. And all we've got is migrations for the users. We don't have anything for the stats or for the profiles. We'll do that right now. And probably the easiest way to do this is we're just going to copy the migrations we already have from the original app. So xcopy /campsite/statwatch/priv repo migrations. Everything from that directory to priv repo migrations. And we'll have a look at those. We're going to have to update them a little bit. So our profiles, name, URL, Twitter, YouTube. Actually, that's okay. The stats, we just want to change this. So on delete will nullify the profile IDs for all of the stats. And our profiles are also going to need user IDs. So we're going to add that to our migration before we run it. So we'll add user ID references users. Since this is a new app, we can actually just drop the whole database. And we should actually, since that database was created while building a different app. And then we'll run through all the migrations and we'll get everything. So mix ecto.drop, then ecto.create. And now we'll go through our 4 migrations. Doesn't work because this gets run before the user migration gets run. That's fine. We'll just take this out of here. So we'll have our old migration and then we'll make a new one. So mix ecto.gen migration, add user ID to profiles. We'll alter the table. Profiles do, and then exactly what we just had. And all right. Good, good. Now let's jump into IEX and test some of those functions in core. All right, we'll just use my own profile info that I pasted in last time. Should call it Alchemist. Okay, now we'll use StatWatch.core.create profile. Good deal. Now let's see if we can list them. Also good. And we'll get by name. Also good. Now let's make the web interface for profiles. So to do that, we're going to go up into StatWatch Web, and we can see there's already some stuff that's been created for users. Like we've got a user controller. It doesn't have a whole lot in it, but we do have one. And we've also got something for users in the router. So we'll just do the same for profiles. We'll make resources, profiles, and profile controller. And it's going to be really similar to the user controller, so we're going to do yet more copy pasting. And then we will literally change every single instance of user into profile. You know, there should be, yes, there is. So Alt-C will toggle case insensitivity on find, and it looks like this also works for multi-select, which is fantastic. Yes, it is. Okay. Profile, and then we'll find user, and we'll replace all of those with profile as well. Got the lowercase and the uppercase. Okay. All right, and then of course we're not in the accounts context anymore. We've got to be in the core context. Okay, with that done, it should work. IEX.bat-s mix phoenix.server. Still got that. Let's make sure users are okay. Users are fine. Looks like we can create a new user. Bob, his username will be B Armstrong. Good deal. We've got a user. Now let's see if we can make a profile. Render is not available, and that is because we don't have a profile view and we don't have profile templates. Okay, that's simple enough. So the views are incredibly simple. Profile view.ex, and instead of user view, this one is called profile view. Okay, now we just don't have an index.html, so we'll make a new directory for profile templates. And we'll start with one specifically for index. And as before, we'll copy the user index in, and I'll change everything to say profile. I'm in retrospect, maybe it would have been worth it to use some kind of generator, but that's okay. And there's some stuff in here that is definitely profile, or that is definitely was user specific. So we'll get rid of that. And we don't have a profile name. We have, what do we have? We have a name, a site. We'll call that site URL. And we have a Twitter and a YouTube channel ID. Looks like we're actually loading something. Good deal. Name, site, Twitter, YouTube channel ID. So we'll make one. And there's no new file. That's fine. And before we make one, let's also add in the logic to display them. So we're going to want a profile name. Let's see, profile.name. And then we're going to want basically the same line repeated for each of the elements in it. 1, 2, 3. So profile name, URL, Twitter, and oh, YouTube's a little bit more complicated. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's more complicated in the stats. In the profile, we've just got the YouTube. Okay. Yeah, the stats would have it broken into channel views, channel videos, and channel subscribers. So now let's make a new form. Just copy the whole thing. new.html.ex. And you know what? I don't like new profile. I'm going to have it be create profile. Okay, so this will basically just call a form. And while we're here, we should probably do the same thing for edit for all of them. So edit.html.ex, and that's going to be the same as that. Form is going to take a little bit more thought because the form is going to have each of the fields. So there is no username. Instead of that, we have URL. And instead of, well, actually we still have the submit, but we need some other things. We need Twitter and we need YouTube. Twitter and YouTube. Let's have a look at that. We'll call this one Alchemist. URL is alchemist.camp. Twitter is alchemistcamp. YouTube ID I'm gonna have to paste in, and show is the one template we don't have yet. That's no problem. We'll just copy the user one, roughly speaking, that is. Okay, and there is no profile name. Instead, this is going to be called site URL. Twitter. And YouTube. And now we can show the profile, and it has automatically reloaded it for us. Yay. So we have profiles. Can we edit them? Wait a second. You know, I hate that. That's in the default. Phoenix generates it for us, but I much prefer to have a divider between them. Much better. Can we edit it? Alchemist. We can edit it. We can get the listing of them. All right, good deal. Profiles are up. Users are up and working. We can show, we can edit. Good deal. Let's actually update that show as well. Put the little divider in there, because I'm a little bit OCD about that. So that's a pretty good start. We've got users working, we've got profiles working, which did not rely on the Phoenix generators, and the basic CRUD is there. Let's have a look at our overall plan. So we have put everything into a Phoenix 1.3 friendly structure where we have our context of accounts and core, some separation in our application logic, and in our overall plan, done this, we've created that, we've created the route. We don't have a view for the stats yet. So we'll just do that. So everything up here is done. And it is quite a bit that's done. We've generated the Phoenix app. We've broken things up into a context. We've pulled in the old functionality, pulled in the requirements we needed, set up the database. We've set it up in the OTP supervision tree. So that's a good amount done, and it's also a good spot to wrap up the video. So next time we're going to make a view of the stats. Actually, it'll be more like an index, because we'll just list out the stats day after day for a given profile from within a profile view. And we're going to set up sessions and an auth system. So right now the users aren't using credentials. They're going to have to, and we're going to have to do password hashing since you can't store them plain in the database. And we'll make an auth controller for convenience, just so that it's just a matter of adding a single plug, just one line to any given controller to restrict various actions to logged in users, or to restrict them to an admin user. Then we're going to limit the visibility of things based on the permissions someone should have, and associate profiles with users, and styling will be the end. Then deploying may or may not happen next video. That's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed seeing this process of building, or at least getting a start to a not completely trivial Phoenix app. And if you would like to see what it takes to go from this into this app where everything is connected and we have extra pages added, and it basically does all the things, including account creation and password hashing and all that stuff, then by all means subscribe, click the bell, and you'll get next video. And until then, code on.